ਔਰ ਅਨਫੋਰਚੂਨੇਟਲੀ ਇਹ ਜੋ ਲੇਡੀ ਜਿਹਦੀ ਮਿਸਿੰਗ ਪਰਸਨ ਦੀ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਂਝੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ, ਉਸਨੂੰ ਮੈਂਟਲ ਹੈਲਥ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਨੇ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰਨਾ ਕਿ ਵਾਈਡਰ ਘੇਰੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂਗਰੀ ਬ੍ਰਿਜ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਲੇਡੀ ਸਾਊਥ ਆਕਲੈਂਡ ਦੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਹਿੱਸੇ 'ਚ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ। ਸੋ ਲੈਟਸ ਕਮ ਟੂ ਦਾ ਪੁਆਇੰਟ। ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਅੱਜ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀਤੇ ਵਾਅਦੇ ਮੁਤਾਬਕ ਆਇਰੀਨ ਹੁਣੀ ਪਹੁੰਚੇ ਨੇ, ਔਰ ਆਇਰੀਨ ਹੁਣਾਂ ਦਾ ਜੋ ਸੰਬੰਧ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਵਾਈਡਰ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਇਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਗੱਲ ਬਹੁਤ ਬੋਲਡ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਕਹਿਣ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਜਾਣੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ। ਪਿਛਲੇ ਦਿਨੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਸ਼ਾਨਦਾਰ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਇੱਕ ਪੈਨਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਾਜ਼ਰੀ ਲਵਾਈ, ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਵੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ। ਔਰ ਸਾਡੇ ਮੁਲਕ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਕੱਲੀਆਂ ਸਾਊਥ ਏਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਔਰਤਾਂ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ, ਬਲਕਿ ਵਾਈਡਰ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਔਰਤਾਂ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਹੱਕ ਹਕੂਕ ਦੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਉਹ ਐਡਵੋਕੇਸੀ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਅੱਗੇ ਚੱਲ ਕੇ ਕੀ ਕੁਝ ਉਹ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਹੁਣ ਤੱਕ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਸਫ਼ਰ ਦੇ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਕੀ ਕੁਝ ਕੀਤਾ, ਉਹਦੀ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਉਹ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਂਝੀ ਕਰਨਗੇ। ਆਇਰੀਨ, ਵੈਲਕਮ ਟੂ ਦ ਸ਼ੋ। ਗੁੱਡ ਮਾਰਨਿੰਗ।
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
It's really good to see you after a long, long time, actually.
Is it really?
Yeah.
We see each other quite often.
Yeah, but on the radio.
Yes, on the radio, definitely, yes.
So सबसे पहला मेरा जो सवाल रहेगा वो यही रहेगा कि जब मैं आपकी क्वालिफिकेशन की तरफ देखता हूँ तो मैं हैरान हो जाता हूँ कि लिमिटेड रिसोर्सेज में से निकल के एक लड़की यहाँ तक कैसे पहुँच जाती है। उसकी जो मैं लर्निंग की जो उसके अंदर वो भूख देखता हूँ कि मुझे ये भी पढ़ना है, मुझे ये भी पढ़ना है, मुझे ये भी सीखना है। तो वहां से शुरू करते हैं।
Thank you. Look, I come from Savo, which is a very small place
But
in
beautiful.
Fiji. Yes, and you've been there.
Yeah.
It's called the hidden paradise of Fiji. So it's mostly like the Queenstown of New Zealand, comparable.
Yes.
And a very small town, a huge diversity of people. And I came to New Zealand in the year 2002.
Okay.
And back then, New Zealand was so different. I lived in Christchurch, lived on the west coast, which was Greymouth.
Yes.
Of the South Island. So
how many
beautiful.
Indians were there at that time?
I could count them on my fingertips. So
My God.
that was us. But beautiful part of New Zealand.
Yes.
And then I moved and lived in
some wild beaches, eh?
Yes, I lived in Nelson for 2 years. And then
you got more sunshine there.
Yes, yeah, beautiful sunshine, beautiful people, lots
Yes.
of ethnic community, former refugee people
Yes,
coming
I've
through.
noticed that.
Yes, so I did my undergraduate at University of Canterbury.
Wonderful.
In primary teaching, so that allowed me to go into home schools, do all sorts of work.
Yeah.
And then finding work was difficult in the teaching sector for a lot of migrant Asian women.
But this is quite interesting when
Yes.
I look at your qualifications, Masters in International Development.
Yes.
This is something different for Indians, I would say.
It is. It is different for Indians in New Zealand.
Yeah.
But it won't be different for, I suppose, for South Asian women in other
Yes.
countries.
Yeah.
Because what we have is we all come from countries where there's been colonization.
Yes.
And out of colonization came development studies a lot of times.
Yes.
So those who work in the space of developing communities, developing countries, in the aid sector, and whole of other sustainable development programs, we'd like to go into Massey University's International Development Program for
फील्ड बहुत बड़ा है, तो आपने शुरुआत कहाँ से की?
The field of international development means you almost become you almost become a specialist in every area.
Yes.
Because you have to work with multi-agencies, multi-sectors, and a whole heap of funders, donors, actors in development to start thinking of how you put programs or how you put national level programs together. So it's the beauty of knowing, working, learning, and understanding different country context, but also what's the strength that New Zealand can bring and share with other countries.
Wonderful.
But the beauty of that also is learning from those countries. What do they do so well with the little that they have?
Yeah.
And in the mix, we look at the strengths of that country, but we also look at what is it that we can leave behind. That countries can prosper, and we don't try and create dependency models. So New Zealand Aid is very good at doing that. And I'm very proud to be, serving out of New Zealand government in the Pacific country for many, many years.
Wonderful. Good to hear, actually.
Yeah, leading most of the health sector development programs for 8 of the Pacific Island countries.
Yes,
And that
yes.
made
Much
it
needed task, actually.
much needed, because New Zealand is part of the Pacific.
Yes.
Right? So we are not living in silos. We are part of the Pacific. We've got so many agreements, treaties that we abide by and live by.
Yep.
And people are always transient. So they're moving in and out of New Zealand, back into the Pacific, coming in. So we have got a relationship that's more than just about money.
Yes.
It's about people. It's about our connections. It's about our journeys, migration patterns.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we are a Pacific country, so we tend to invest most into the Pacific countries from New Zealand.
Tell me one very interesting fact about your personality. How much Indian you are?
How much Indian I am?
I know you've gone global.
I'm very Indian at heart, so I will eat my rice and curry if I have to every day.
I can see that.
But I'm also very Fijian at heart, so that's a
yes.
uniqueness in Fiji Indians.
So good, so good.
I'll still eat my taro and tapioca every
Why
day,
not?
which is
You should
manioc
proud to
and
be who you are.
cassava. Yes, and I can't leave that behind. That's 140 years of who my people are.
How about the next generation?
The next generation might be a bit different. And I'm talking about Kiwi Indians in New Zealand. So people back at home, of course, in Fiji, we are who we are. But Kiwi Indians in New Zealand, we might be eating more fish and chips.
I know.
More biryanis and more
Exactly.
tandooris and everything else. And because this is what New Zealand is, right? Our children will grow and they'll be different.
Wonderful.
And that's the beauty of being who we are.
Yes. IREEN, अभी 2 वीक पहले एथनिक अफेयर्स के बारे में एक बहुत बड़ी कॉन्फ्रेंस हुई. हम उन दिनों की बात कर रहे हैं जिन दिनों में ब्रायन तमाकी ने बहुत सी बातें ऐसी की जो न्यूजीलैंड में फिट नहीं बैठती, जो हमारी यहाँ की सोसाइटी को बहुत बुरी तरह फील होती हैं कि यार ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए था, जो ब्रायन तमाकी ने अपने मार्च के दौरान किया. तो उसके बाद आपकी एक बड़ी बोल्ड सी अपीयरेंस हुई एक पैनल में. यहाँ पे डैम जेनी शिपली बहुत बड़ा नाम है, राहुल वॉटसन गोविंदन बड़ा नाम है, और तीसरा बड़ा नाम आपका था. क्या क्या बातें हुई वहाँ पे?
So that panel mostly focused on social cohesion, right?
Yes.
And what does that mean for New Zealand today?
And how proudly we live in this country with harmony.
Absolutely. So while I said at that panel that one of the key things that we must remember is that people like Brian Tamaki and others will always pop up, right? There's no stopping. And that's not only him, there's going to be others all around the world. So our geopolitical situation is such.
Yes.
But that does not mean we lose the radar on who we are as people, right? As humans first, as New Zealanders first. And New Zealand is about diversity of people.
Of course.
So the whole topic about social cohesion is how do we cultivate the sense of identity in each one of us?
Yes.
The sense of belonging, but belonging safely in a country.
Exactly.
Right? The sense of not going
through... You don't have
to
find your space. It has to be there in place.
It has to be there. And not going through every moment in my life where there's discrimination, where I have to face hatred, some form of
and this could be dangerous too.
It is very dangerous, right? Because it takes one person to spark the most out of something that's not needed. We saw that in Christchurch. We saw
even in here. One of the guys, even standing in the crowd, was shouting, kill them all, Brian.
Yes. And what it's creating is not only anxiety in ethnic spaces, but anxiety in whole of New Zealand, right?
Yes.
Because we are at a space and time where as a civilized community, we can see that happening. And then we look at our government and say, what are the conditions you are providing that provides safety for all New Zealanders?
और वो भी तब जब इंटरनेशनली हम लोग जाने जाते हैं अपनी शांति के लिए, एक पीसफुल कंट्री का जो लेबल लगा हुआ है, उसको भी तो खतरा पैदा हो गया ना?
Absolutely. It has an impact on, you look at America, right? Huge drop in tourism numbers.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And we will go down the same trajectory if we keep being the country that in one space we were saying that we flew the flag when it came to Islamophobia International Day,
yes.
right? That came out of Christchurch 15th
Lucky you
February.
touched that subject, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, at home, we are not bold enough to address those subjects, whether it's government, whether it's community leaders, or whether it's individuals. We have to start learning what this subject matter really means.
Do you have any complaints about current government not addressing this issue appropriately?
Absolutely. I think the government itself realizes that this is an issue, right? And it's not an easy one to address, because there are other things that people will say around that, that it's my right to speak. But what we need to also understand is, what is my moral obligation, and what is my duty and sense of responsibility towards another human, irregardless of that person's color, faith, religious belief, sexual gender orientation, or whatever it is.
Of course.
How do we respect people beside us?
And let's talk about the other side of the picture as well. When you talking about the responsibilities, when you talking about your duties and obligations towards this nation and the society, I think we should be careful about our rights as well.
Yes. So, and that's the whole thing. That how do we unpack rights, right? New Zealand is a signatory to human rights, but we are also signatory to many conventions.
And we are a Commonwealth country.
So we have to really look at the diverse majority of who's coming through the country, right? The people who are coming. How do we become a country that's more accepting of the people who are coming, but also how do we raise awareness of different cultures, different people? Now, Christchurch 15, I always go back to Christchurch 15 because it gave us an opportunity to learn, right? Where we
no wonder why 700 pages for Royal Commission inquiry and you got recommendations of more than 70 pages, and sometimes people don't even think about those recommendations.
Yes. So one of the key things that it taught us was, how do we open our doors as faith-based organizations? And this is a reflection on us as well, right? So how do we as communities within ethnic specific spaces open ourselves to other communities, right? We need to start creating awareness and creating welcoming spaces to have this kōrero of how do we build collective thinking, but how are we so unique, as well as how we are so the same.
I'll tell you a very interesting thing, Irene, while you're talking on this issue. This is very important. I do understand that. But in the meantime, I do believe people like yourself, जो लोग non-political lobbying करते हैं एक अच्छे cause के लिए, उनका कहीं ना कहीं पे गवर्नमेंट पे प्रेशर तो रहता है, बट उतना काम नहीं हो रहा जितना होना चाहिए.
Yes. Always the case. Look, the government's role is to create the conditions, right? The environment, the law, the policies, the programs that benefits all New Zealanders, but also benefits those who are falling behind, right? Communities' role is to create connections, right? So government conditions, communities create connections. Connections in the sense like, let's know about each other well.
Of course.
Right? Let's look at places where we can thrive and give opportunities for communities to thrive. Local government is a good example. Who do we have in local government that understands those communities? Right? Local governments pop up and say, how can I make people understand better if I write their languages, I write the pamphlets in their languages. That is not only connection that we need. And it's a typical question I'll get from local board members.
Most of the time.
Yes. So we have to start being in spaces, but also teaching people. What does that mean to have us? What's our contribution to our country? Not to yours only, but also to our country, because we are contributing largely to the GDP as ethnic people in New Zealand. But what does that mean in terms of our own well-being? Right? Are we equally invested into? We see that with our social service providers, with our NGOs, always running on the back of an oily rag. Right? We are almost like, when do we ever plan if we are always on the back burner, right? If you have only 30,000 as an NGO to operate that year, right, or 60,000, when do you ever stop to plan because you've got to deliver services
Of course.
with a
And you have enough
high
funding.
needs, with a high needs population, right? So one thing that we tend to do, and we brought this up at the social cohesion discussions for Ministry of Ethnic Communities too, that usually by default our communities think that we as ethnic people don't get affected as much. Right? We are always looking at the data and the statistics that appear for Maori and Pacifica.
Of course.
So by default, we think it's not ours, and we are fine. Our community is mostly fine.
But this is not the case.
But that is not the case. Our community has got lots of mental health issues.
And recent years after COVID, actually, it's been totally gone up to the very high.
And that affects our women, the children at home, the men who go to work, those who are in self-employment and who are running little businesses everywhere. So, Auckland itself, there's, a huge part of Auckland operates on SMEs.
IREEN, interestingly, you touched on this issue. Let's talk about IREEN recently became board chair for Women's Health Action New Zealand. This gives her the chance to advocate for our ethnic women's health equally, which is not happening these days particularly. And I can see some of the pictures recently about Hawke's Bay today, in which they report actually more than 900 women in Hawke's Bay are waiting to see a gynecology specialist, many of them facing unbearable pain. Rafaelia Mello reports. And on very next image, reported by Radio New Zealand, everyone is already extremely into the pump, particularly the midwives. You can see day to day how they are struggling. And there's a huge story on that. And also Radio New Zealand also covered people are at breaking point, safe staffing now, and also some other issues like how they cut down the beds, maternity beds in Wellington recently.
Yes.
So how do you advocate all these issues?
Look, I think we must understand that women uphold the world, right? And whenever we're planning in the health sector or any sector in New Zealand, we think of the rippling effect that will happen within societies, within communities, within families, if we don't invest in women's health properly. Okay. So this is women's health, and I'm also talking about sexual and reproductive health, right? Something that a woman starts planning and looking into well before she gets pregnant. Access to care, access to services, access to services in the right time, at the right place, right? Women don't have to wait for 4 weeks to get to a GP. They don't have to wait for a year to go and get treatment for something that needs to be attended to.
How about the recent announcements by Health Minister Simeon Brown?
Which one?
Which is not living too far from your place.
No, he's in my electorate. So, yes, the government's trying its best to uplift services, to
private
plug in places, and to also bring public-private partnerships together.
Yes.
And that's a good model. It works.
Good.
But if a woman is already struggling, right? 300,000 women 300,000 people who missed out on pay equity claims were women. Right? A lot of them are women who are working in places where money is hard to come by, right? You can only imagine if that woman is now told that you cannot access care today because of certain reasons. The likely scenario is that woman will have enduring pain for more than a year or 2 years. In some cases, women are waiting for 3 years before they are seen in surgical places. So that pain is quite intense. And then what we're also seeing is that the rippling effect is on communities, on our economy,
of course,
but also on a woman's well-being as a whole, right? A woman's well-being means that she can't go to work. If she goes down, her children can't go to school, or children go to school not feeling,
of course,
100%.
अब उनको breakfast नहीं मिलेगा, lunch नहीं मिलेगा, school से आएंगे तो उनको कोई पूछने वाला नहीं रहेगा.
Absolutely. So
things will be imbalanced.
Yes. So you can understand that the woman doesn't work by herself. There's a village that she has to raise and she has to look after. Women make up about 48% of our employed workforce in full-time and part-time employment in New Zealand.
Huge numbers.
And 65% of that is contributing to, the amount of women that go into workforce on an everyday general basis. So you can imagine that women do contribute more.
Yes.
But if we don't look after their health and we keep falling behind in meeting the targets for women's well-being,
Yes.
early screening on breast cancer, cervical cancer,
Yes.
and looking after women in maternity care, which is so important because that sets the trajectory for child well-being.
No doubt.
So if you don't look after a woman while she's in maternity space, physically, mentally, culturally, the cultural part of that is very important, right? Because a lot of our women, South Asian women, ethnic women, come to this country alone.
Yes.
So we see that trajectory.
They're
of
hardworking bunch anyway.
Hardworking bunch, but the trajectory of mental health harm, postnatal depression, anxiety, and everything else sets in. So if we don't have a country that's looking after our women and their health in the way that they should, then we will have a country that's not economically prospering as well.
Wonderful.
And when we talk about economic prosperity, it's not about the dollar figure only. It's about the social cohesion element of where does this woman belong at work?
I think this is a collective social responsibility for all of us. Doesn't matter if we are working in public sector or private sector or being an individual or being a organizational structure. This is about time. हम लोग अभी फिक्र नहीं करेंगे तो बहुत देर हो जाएगी. It will be too late.
If you take an example of a woman who's working in those spaces of pay equity, right? Social workers, your teachers, these are people who are there.
They are backbone of the society.
Backbone of the society to hold the social cohesiveness of the society together.
Yes.
But these are also women who will not be able to afford a private healthcare plan, right? तो क्या होता है? ये women are then told, you go into a public space, apply for the funding on your own back, whether it's a bank loan or what, go and get your private surgery done. Because why would you wait for 3 years? Now I've seen women. I've been one of those women who waited for 4 years for a surgery, right?
Because you got no other option.
You got no other option.
You don't have money in your pocket at that time.
And even if people have money, the priorities are different for different persons. But we all pay, most of us pay taxes. We want to have better services.
That's right.
So you are putting that woman in debt, right? She has to go where she should be having a state care service.
Yes.
She's going in debt in a private care. So the government needs to balance that act of what are we really doing, and are we making everyday New Zealand woman, go and apply for loan to have a basic right to health care. That is wrong. And that worries me because our mantra in the health sector has always been zero harm. Zero harm to our patients and zero harm to our staff. Right? Now what we are seeing in everyday news is how many healthcare workers are also struggling.
Exactly.
People are breaking their legs in the news and pulling shifts and all sorts. So it's not a very healthy workplace if people are always under the pump.
Exactly. अरीन, जब हम बात कर रहे हैं तो बहुत से रूल हैं जिन रूल्स में आप बड़े लंबे समय से अपना फर्ज निभाती आ रही हैं. पर्टिकुलरली मेरे ख्याल से, if I'm not wrong, this is continuously 6th year you being as a co-chair for the जो हमारा बोर्ड है, एथनिक बोर्ड है काउंसिल के लिए. इसी तरह मैं सुमेर प्लस में देख रहा हूँ, उसमें भी आपका रोल बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. तो ये सारी चीजें, एक ना बड़ा अच्छा शेर है कि इतने हिस्सों में बट गया हूं मैं कि मेरे हिस्से में कुछ बचा ही नहीं. तो आयरीन के हिस्से में क्या बचता है इतने रूल्स के बाद?
I don't think I've ever stopped living in places where I flourish. So I get very bored if I'm in a project for too long. And that's just who we are. I suppose that's how my parents have brought us up.
Yes.
We are always people, mehnat karo aur sabko seva bhi karo. On the same aspect. My father was a man who served his whole life.
Tell us about your family.
Tell us about my family. So I come from a family of 5 siblings, all of us, and my father and my mother.
अच्छा
So my father was the first FIFA football accredited ref in Fiji.
अच्छा
He was the president for Madhwata Muslim League
वाह
in Lambasa. So you've been to Lambasa.
yes
And I'm talking about 1980s, 1990s.
very well done
Mum is a woman who's, who would say on a paper is a domestic worker, but she was the first woman to drive a truck
अच्छा
in my town.
see
Woman in construction.
no wonder why I'm asking about your family
Yes, so my dada was a sweet maker,
Acha.
mithai wala in town. So mum
तो आप तो
naturally
मोटे
became
हुए
a
नहीं
mithai.
मिठाई खा के
No, I don't really make mithais and I don't like mithai, but I do like savories.
but really good.
So my parents are very hardworking individuals,
I can
very
see that.
driven. All of my siblings have done very well. Most
good.
of my sisters have been international students in New Zealand on scholarships from NZ and stuff.
Well done.
So one of my sisters is
in medical profession.
Yes, nearly all of them. So I've
Acha.
got one sister who's a nurse, another who's a dentist, Otago University qualified.
Brilliant.
And then I went into the health sector in planning. And the youngest is a teacher, and my brother is a builder.
Wow.
Yeah.
Irene, moving forward, this country mein numbers are growing up. When I'm talking about South Asian community, including Punjabis, Gujarati, Indians, Fijian Indians, हमारे लोगों के लिए wider community में mix and mingle होने के chances काफी होते हैं, but they are struggling to establish their family life. They are struggling to establish their immigration status most of the time, I would say. तो उनमें बहुत से challenges रहते हैं जो रिपोर्ट नहीं होते कभी भी, चाहे वो सेक्सुअल हरासमेंट का है, चाहे वो डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस का है, चाहे वो एल्डर अब्यूज का है. कितनी चीजें हैं जिनको आप फर्स्ट हैंड इंफॉर्मेशन आपके पास रहती है, अभी भी कितनी रिपोर्टिंग है, थोड़ा वो बताइए. और लोगों को, अपने लोगों को एटलीस्ट मोटिवेट जरूर कीजिए कि दे शुड रिपोर्ट द मैटर.
Yes, definitely. So one of the key things that we see is that people just generally don't report, like you have said. And it's not that they don't want to report. So if you're a new migrant, so here's a case of a new migrant, families coming through. There's two things there. First thing, they're thinking, if I do this, what impact will it have on my visa accreditation and other things? So people are more worried about the outcome of their visas.
Yes.
Right? What we'd like to say to them that this country provides you avenues to have visas that allows you to stay when you are going through family harm cases. So New Zealand government's done that. That's the beauty of what we have done over the years.
Okay.
The second thing is that what we must also realize for us who are living here for many years, that there are avenues for you to go and report. Not everybody wants to go to New Zealand Police, and that's fine, because trust in systems takes time. Right? We come from countries, and that's not to do with New Zealand Police itself. We come from countries where we generally don't trust police,
Of course,
and other systems around us. But do know that you can go to New Zealand Police, and they will look after you in the best way possible.
I've seen quite a few refugees actually.
Yes.
They became a wonderful police officers.
Absolutely. And if you don't want to go to New Zealand Police, then go to social services that exist. You have social services that exist for all of us. So that's one thing. The other thing is that in your own communities, grow your connections of people. Wise people.
Socialize.
Yes, socialize, have connections, create those relationships, because they are important. But then we also must look at those spaces where people socialize, right? Whether it's the mandir, whether it's the masjid,
They are not
whether it's
religious
the
congregations, they are also
gurudwaras.
social meeting points.
Yes. So these places also have to become those places where people are welcome to talk about the abuse that they're going through.
Of course.
Right? And we can't always say that because our belief and our religious belief is such, we won't be able to address that issue with you. We will address it with your men first.
Yeah.
So we all have to be, as faith-based practitioners and other places, open to learning of how do we address harm. All right, so we've seen some really good examples of that in New Zealand.
Trustworthy लोग ढूंढने मुश्किल हो जाते हैं.
It is very hard, but if we all start training people within spaces, right? This said
They need to
recently,
be professional.
New Zealand Sikh Women's Association trained a whole heap of teachers in the Gurudwara how to become the champions of change when it comes to family harm.
Brilliant.
Right? So those women in the language nest school are able to listen to a child or listen to a parent, not run straight to Oranga Tamariki or the police if the risk
Otherwise,
is low.
वो लंबी लड़ाई चलेगी फिर.
So how do we address? But the first thing is the awareness of harm.
Yes.
Right? Understanding how to prevent that harm, understanding how to actively be responding to that harm. But if you are trained to respond, then we must keep you safe as well.
Very
So
well
it's
said.
the institutions behind those women, in those spaces like the Gurudwara and the Mandir and the Masjid and the churches need to be now understanding that, hey, we have got our own laws in New Zealand that we have to abide by.
अच्छा, अगर मैं कुछ सवाल ना छोटे छोटे सवाल पूछने हैं आपको.
हाँ.
सबसे फेवरेट सॉन्ग कौन सा है आपका?
Lamborghini.
Oh, Punjabi song.
Yes. That
Do
one.
you understand what he's saying?
Most of the time, yes, I do.
Okay. And favorite Bollywood movie?
I would like to watch anything that comes for Amitabh Bachchan.
Favorite food?
I'd say fry fish and cassava.
Oh my God. How about the political interests? Left, right, center?
I've been very apolitical from day one. So my work doesn't really allow me to see left or right. I just see what is right on the day, and I'll praise you. But if I see falling, then I'll question you.
What next for you?
What's next for me? I don't really know half of the time. I love humming in the spaces where women's health is.
I love it.
Yeah, and anywhere people want me or have me, and whether it's planning health sector programs or planning climate action programs.
Oh yes, why not?
Anything that helps our Tamariki and women thrive, you'll find me in those spaces.
Yes. I can see you over there.
Yeah. So I just love being wherever we can see impactful measures. Wherever we can see children do well.
Yes.
You'll find me there.
बलविंदर संधू आपको हेलो बोल रहे हैं, एंड ऑल्सो फरहाना जाफिया अली आपके प्रोग्राम को पसंद कर रही हैं. Last but not least, what is your message to our next generation?
Keep standing up for what you believe is right. Always do a self-check.
Wow.
The next generation will grow up in a very different environment to what you and I grew up. They're growing up with gadgets in their hands.
Yes.
I'd say to them to at times put the gadget down.
Yes.
Create the connections that matter human to human, not human over internet. So I think that there will be
इसके ऊपर अलग बातचीत करनी पड़ेगी.
Yes, forever. But I'd like to think that the youth today will live in a better world that we had.
हमारा फ्यूचर उनके हाथ में है.
Absolutely, and we need to start listening to their voices. How wonderful that you had Samara yesterday or the other day.
Yes.
Listening to those youthful voices is what
वो क्या चाहते हैं?
Yes.
अपनी बात थोपने की बजाय उनको भी सुनना पड़ेगा.
Yes, we have to. And the more we create spaces to bring those youth together, to listen to them, children in the spaces that you've got here in art classes, those are the spaces we need to nurture.
और हर एक आदमी की शख्सियत अलग-अलग है.
Yes.
Every person is different.
Yes. I always say that in life there is an analogy of a chutney and a samosa. Right? You can't go without each other in our communities, but also when we make chutneys, we bring different kind of thoughts, ingredients, recipes together. Right? So some are passed by generations on.
Of course.
Some we create today because we've got peaches and apples, right? So we all need to learn that at some point, as we look through the future, that we will start having different ingredients. We will start having different thought process on how to make the chutney.
Yes.
Right? Some chutney will be overcooked, some undercooked. But what will come to it is that the realization that we are all different but also unique.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's the beauty of our youth today.
I think we should be more open towards other communities, about other cultures, their food, their beliefs, their lifestyle.
Yes.
This is the beauty of this nation.
Yeah.
That this is what you believe, and this is why we all love you.
Thank
Honestly.
you. Yeah.
And मनप्रीत घुमन है जो बोल रहे हैं कि बहुत अच्छे विचार हैं आयरीन के. फरीन यूसुफ बोल रहे हैं वेल डन.
Those are my cousins from Fiji.
अच्छा, तो वो लोग वहां बैठे सुन रहे हैं.
Yes, yes. Isn't that the beauty of
Beautiful.
today? That I've got my cousins, both of them dialing in from Fiji and listening. Both
Acha.
very great women
Thank
in
you.
the work that they've done. Yes, thank you.
तो ये सारी चीजें अच्छे तरीके से आगे बढ़नी चाहिए ताकि न्यूजीलैंड में एक मल्टीकल्चरल जो सोसाइटी है वो अपनी अपनी जगह पे हार्मनी से रहे और एक दूसरे को स्पेस देना सीखे. स्पेशली जो मैं आपका एजेंडा देख रहा हूँ इन माय एवरीडे लाइफ के जो सोशल कोहेशन है उसके ऊपर जो विचार अलग अलग हो सकते हैं, ओपिनियन अलग अलग हो सकते हैं, बट एज लॉन्ग एज आप एक दूसरे को स्पेस दे रहे हैं तो वो जरूरी है आगे बढ़ना है तो.
Yes, let's learn to value those each ingredient, as I said, that people bring with them. You know, and only when we are ready to, you know, have those spaces to talk in.
Yes.
Like this. You know, a Maori woman asked me just last week, she said, you know, a beautiful fire at Auckland University of Technology. I was their guest speaker for their leadership program. And she said to me, I'm from Manurewa, she goes, I have been looking after my people and it's hard enough. How do we create that space that we hear others as well? So this is the thing, Parminder, that we are ready as well. You know, we need to now start weaving the threads, coming into spaces where we share our stories, because our stories are very common. You know, whether you're a displaced community or you're coming to New Zealand with a high hope, aspiration, fears, and the challenges, we are here. Some of us have been here for decades, you know, 3-4 generations down. While for me, this is my 5th generation.
Of course.
You know, I've stopped going home to Fiji for Christmas because I need to create Christmas memories for my children here.
यही आपका गांव है.
यही हमारा गांव है. And it's taken some of us 20 years to realize that this is home for us.
What a brilliant transformation.
So we have to transform our thinking and who we are, but never forget what makes us who we are. You know,
doubt.
Fiji will never go out of me.
Yes.
You know, and it's a beautiful place in a country. But at the same time, this is home for me now. This is home for my children. This will be home for my grandchildren. So
it's always good to see when you meeting people who can think on the bigger canvas actually. Hastings से राम चौधरी जी आपको राम राम जी नमस्कार बुला रहे हैं.
राम राम.
और अच्छा रेहाना जी हैं behind the curtain.
Yes.
रेहाना जी आपको हेलो बोल रहे हैं.
Hi रेहाना बूबू.
बहुत अच्छा लगा. हालांकि बातें बहुत करनी थी क्योंकि जिस रोल में आप हैं उनके हिसाब से तो 3 घंटे का शो होना चाहिए. लेकिन you're doing really well and I hope you keep up the spirit in the same manner. And God bless. Irene.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to all the listeners. You know, do connect over LinkedIn or social media or anything. If you have questions, do ask. Happy to always comment.
Wonderful. Those is an Irene ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਗੱਲ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਲੀਕੇ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕਹੀ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਮੁਲਕ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਸ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਤੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਏ ਆ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਆਪਣੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਸ ਹੈ, ਪਰ ਇਸ ਮੁਲਕ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਜ਼ਬ ਹੋਣ ਦੇ ਲਈ, ਮਿਕਸ ਐਂਡ ਮਿੰਗਲ ਹੋਣ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੁਰਬਾਨੀ ਦੇਣੀ ਪੈਂਦੀ ਆ. ਕੁਰਬਾਨ ਹੋਣ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਇਹ ਮੁਲਕ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਅਡੋਪਟ ਕਰਦਾ, ਪਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਮੁਲਕ ਨੂੰ ਅਡੋਪਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਲਾਜ਼ਮੀ ਆ. ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੀ ਭੈਣਾਂ ਭਰਾਵਾਂ ਨੇ ਹਾਜ਼ਰੀ ਲਵਾਈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਸ਼ੁਕਰੀਆ. ਆਇਰੀਨ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੋਈ ਇਸ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਦੁਬਾਰਾ ਵੀ ਰੀਬ੍ਰੋਡਕਾਸਟ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਫੇਸਬੁੱਕ ਉੱਤੇ ਵੀ, ਰੇਡੀਓ ਉੱਤੇ ਵੀ. ਆਪਣਾ ਖਿਆਲ ਰੱਖਣਾ. ਆਇਰੀਨ ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਵੈਰੀ ਮਚ. ਬਹੁਤ ਸ਼ੁਕਰੀਆ. ਬਹੁਤ ਮਿਹਰਬਾਨੀ. ਦੋਸਤੋ ਆਇਰੀਨ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਕੁਝ ਕਾਰੋਬਾਰੀ ਮਿੱਤਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਸੰਦੇਸ਼ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਮੁੜ